That's recording now. Okay, so can you start by just giving me a bit of a background into just a brief background into your life? Whereabouts were you born?
I was born in Hull, in East Yorkshire.
Yes.
Kingston upon Hull is its proper title. And born in a terrace house.
Yes.
My parents separated when I was 3 years old.
Really?
And I came under the care of the Hull local authority. Was at homes in Hessel until I was 10. And I was taken by my father down to, with my brother, down to London, to Hillingdon actually, where I finished up. My brother finished up in hospital, burns on his backside, because he was working on the Mersey Tunnel, and she was a bitch, and absolutely cruel. I can't say any more about that. And then I came under the care of the Waifs and Stray Society, where I was transferred up to Tatton Hall, which is outside Chester. When I was 14, I was transferred to Standon in Stafford. And there I was a trainee butler, houseboy in Formby and Birkdale. And then I was whisked away to sea, started the war, whisked away to sea January 1940. And that was my sea life.
That's how you began. That's how you came to the Navy, Merchant Navy.
Merchant Navy. Yeah.
Okay. So whereabouts did you join the Merchant Navy, and how did you come to
Liverpool?
Liverpool, Merseyside was that?
Yeah, Liverpool itself. Yeah.
Right. Whereabouts in Liverpool was that? Is that at the Albert Docks or places like that?
It was in the middle of the Mersey.
Really?
Yeah. I received half an hour's notice. The galley boy of the ship had absconded, and I was under the control of the Waifs and Stray Society, and I went out to the ship with the captain on the pilot boat. I was told to take my glasses off. We climbed up the rope ladder of a steamer in ballast, and we'd no sooner on board than the ship sailed.
What was the ship's name?
Ship sailed the Madras City.
Oh, right. Is that Madras is in the modern day Chennai in India?
Madras City, yes.
Yes, because
Walter Untim the line. Yeah.
When you signed, so did you sign anything, or did you just informally join like that? So?
I signed some papers on board. I asked if I could put my glasses on. Yeah. Because I was on board by then, so Shanghaied in effect.
All right. So this was in 1940, was it?
January 1940.
January 1940.
War had been declared in September 1939.
Were you surprised when you heard war had been declared?
No, because I was only 16, 17, and it was just one of those things. You have to remember that at my day and age, it's not like the modern youth. It was still the era of the haves and the have-nots, and I was one of those with the have-nots. So we didn't have much knowledge of these things.
Did you first hear about it when Chamberlain came back from Munich in 1938?
Oh yes, yes. I knew that he, in effect, had bought us 12 months' time.
Did you think it was genuine peace he'd bought, or just a temporary respite from?
We all knew that it was a respite to give us time to rearm.
Do you think that was the right decision for him to make?
Yes. We would not have been prepared in 1938.
Did you were the policies of Hitler breaking the Treaty of Versailles, was that reported at all in the news, or was that just?
The rot started in with Hitler and Germany way back when they reneged on Czechoslovakia. That's how far back it went. When we were au fair with any of the business.
Do you think Britain was right to get involved in the war?
Oh yes. The threat to Europe was so great because it's knocking people off piece by piece, and we would have been next, in spite of what he said.
Yes. How did you, when you heard war had been declared, did you think Germany would be easily defeated, or do you think it would be a hard fight?
Never thought about it.
Yeah. It was just war was declared, and that was that. You had to get on with it.
Yes, well, at that age, it was just an event, and when I went to sea, the danger didn't occur to me at all, in any shape or form.
Did you feel that joining the Navy would be far safer than any other service?
Well, I wasn't a robust child, and not in the military sense, and I can't honestly say that any of that occurred to me at all.
It was just employment to be there.
Just employment, that's right.
Had you had any proper employment before then? You said you'd been training as a butler, but were you employed for that?
Well, you have to remember that I was brought up in Holmes from the age of 3.
Yes.
I was under the domination of other people all the time. I had no will of my own.
Yes.
And when I eventually climbed on board that, within 24 hours, I changed from a boy into a man.
Really?
It was as quick as that.
Can you? So, what was your role aboard your ship?
I started life as a galley boy.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, did you? Was your general role in the galley throughout that, or did you go to other parts of the ship while you were there?
Oh yes, you go all over the ship. The standard tramp steamer is the galleys aft and the bridge is forward, and I just roamed the ship, and then I became an assistant steward.
Yes.
And an engineer steward as they progress through life. Yeah.
How long did it take you to progress? Would you say through through the ranks to the steward?
Well, progression on board ship is that very often, due to somebody else's failing, and we had an assistant steward who'd jumped ship, so I automatically was promoted to be the assistant steward, and that was on a tanker, and that was the Iroquois, which again has a story of its own. Because that was a ship that towed a barge across the Atlantic.
Really?
Not when I was on, but it had previously. And there's a book there that tells you all about the Iroquois.
Okay. I'll consult that later. That's okay. When you'd finally joined up on the when you'd actually joined the ship, did your ships join other convoys immediately, or did they sail independently?
The first time we went to sea, we were in a convoy of 6 ships.
6. Right.
And as we were sailing out of the Mersey, one ship was bombed. So it missed the convoy. So 5 of us, and we sailed out for about 2 days, and then we were on our own.
Did you have any kind of escort at all?
Not that I can remember.
So
Just the 6 ships. Yeah.
So no kind of destroyers or.
Oh no, we didn't have destroyers. The biggest you had then would trawlers at the time, and then corvettes.
Yeah. Did any of these these 6 ships have any kind of weaponry of their own? So, did any of them have anti-aircraft guns or any kind of small caliber naval guns?
Not at the very beginning. No.
But later on in the war, did they get them?
Later on in the war, they got a big 4-inch gun aft, and Oerlikon guns.
Oh yes.
Around the ship. Yeah.
Those were fat.
And they were manned by the crew.
Right.
Yeah. Except they used to have 1 or 2 DEMs on board.
Okay.
Defence of the enemy against merchant shipping. They're called DEMs.
So this convoy route was from the Mersey to New York, then, was it?
It's to Halifax, to Halifax, Canada.
Nova Scotia, then.
Yeah.
Right.
And it was January. It took us a month to do a fortnight's voyage.
Yeah.
We were in ballast. So every time you the bow went down, the stern came up, and the propeller spun in the air. So the chief engineer spent all his time in the engine room, shutting the engine down and opening it up again. And one day we're in exactly the same situation, same place as we were 24 hours ago.
The sea was so heavy you couldn't sail ahead. Really?
So that was my first introduction to sea. January North Atlantic, which is acknowledged to be the worst period at sea for the Atlantic. Really? North Atlantic.
So a steep learning curve then.
Yes.
When you were on, did a lot of people get seasick aboard the ship?
Yes, I was seasick for 9 days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how many was 6 ships a normal number for a convoy back then?
This is what at the start of the war. Eventually, we over the course of the years, we'd have many as 100 ships.
Really?
Yeah.
So what happened when you finally got to Halifax on the ship?
Well, we got to Halifax eventually. And we tied up, and it used to snow overnight,
Mhm.
and we were loading grain,
Yes.
and the grain and the snow, I had to chip the ship off because the weight between the grain and the snow was so great that before you could sail, if you didn't, the ship would topple over
Really.
because there was that much snow and chaff on.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So it added that much weight to the snow.
that's
So
right.
heavy.
Yeah,
Really.
and then it was all top weight.
So the Madras City was carrying grain then on its was that its main cargo, or did you carry other?
We carried all grain all the way back.
All grain.
Mm.
When you joined, what was the or possibly among the crew, what was the what was generally considered to be the biggest threat? I mean, do you think battleships were the biggest threat, or enemy battleships, that is, or U-boats or aircraft?
What was that question again?
Which do you think was at the time? What did you feel was the biggest threat to the ships? So if you were to
Oh,
get
without a doubt, submarines.
submarines,
Mm.
was there anyone on board who knew the First World War in the Atlantic then?
Not that I'm aware of. It, it, the seamen don't talk about their war exploits at all. They're more concerned about the ship.
Well, I suppose to keep up morale, isn't it? Would you say?
Well, it's just a job.
Yes.
Mm.
So when this first, you said the first ship was bombed. Were any ships actually badly damaged by that first attack when you said the ship was bombed?
Well, we didn't know because obviously we filed ships, but the five that were left, we sailed, and we just left that ship. We didn't stop to consider our first aim was to get out.
So a ship. So if you
And
got
don't forget,
attacked,
I was in the galley then as well.
Yeah. So if a ship got attacked, all the ships just had to sail on. You couldn't stop.
Oh yes, you sailed on regardless.
So did you sail back in the same ship across the Atlantic?
Yes.
Was that generally a repeat of the first trip?
Yes, and because I was less than 6 months, I immediately sign on again. You have to serve a minimum of 6 months.
Yes.
And a maximum of 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you're going up to the Far East, 3 years.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Sorry, can I just check the camera's definitely recording? Yes.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah, it's recording fine, yes, thank you. Sorry to bring this up, but you mentioned that you had a friend aboard the Royal Oak. Can you tell me anything about that at all? Well,
he was in the homes like we were. He was older than me.
Mm-hmm.
I only knew of him through the Waif and Stray Society,
mm-hmm.
and we were all based on Liverpool.
Yes.
And some of them did the training on board the Indefatigable.
Oh yes.
The training ship.
Yes.
Me, I never did any training at all. I was pushed away to sea, but a lot of these did their training on the Indefatigable. And quite a lot of the Waif and Stray boys either joined the Navy principally,
yes,
or were sent abroad to be farmers in the colonies, as they were then.
Was there anything particularly appealing about the Navy to those boys?
Just a way of life.
Was it one of the few places which was offering any employment at the time?
Well, again, I have to emphasise that we were under the control of the Waif and Stray Society, and we went where we were told.
Right.
So
So when you got back to Merseyside after your first voyage, did you stay on the same ship after that point?
Yes, I immediately re-signed because it was less than 6 months.
Yes. So what was your second voyage like?
You'd have to start going through the book now because I can't remember.
Okay. Right,
Yeah.
Okay. Did you regard what your job? Did you regard the merchant? Did you think the merchant navy was doing an important job at the time?
Important in the sense that we were bringing merchandise back to the country.
Yeah.
In that sense, yes.
Yes. You felt like you were doing an important job by being in the merchant navy.
Not principally, no. The principal job was to get your job done.
Yes. Even though it was those supplies which were actually keeping Britain in the war.
Well, we never thought about that.
Yeah.
It was later on as the submarines started getting active.
Yes.
And as the convoys got bigger and ships were being sunk,
Yes.
that we were aware of the danger, if you like.
Yes.
But you become fatalistic, and we literally lived each day as it came.
Mm-hmm.
We never thought about tomorrow. And if a ship was sunk, our immediate thought, well, it's not us. And the ship just sailed on. Regardless of the number of ships that were sunk, we as an individual ship would carry on sailing in the normal course of events. And you carried out your duties in the normal course of events.
Sorry again about the Madras City. How big was your ship? I mean, and what?
About 3,000 tons.
Okay.
Yeah, which was the average size. It's what you call tramp steamers.
Yes.
Yeah, average size in those days.
Yeah. The tramp steamers so called because they had no set route. They just went on.
Well, about 50 odd crew.
Yeah.
And it's coal firing, so they had stokers and all that sort of thing on board. Yeah.
So there were about 50 of you in total aboard one of those.
50 from navigating officers and down to the engineering crew and to the catering staff. Three distinct departments.
Yeah. When did you first learn that France had been defeated by Germany?
Well, we would learn it in the normal course of events. I think we mostly learn when we hit shore mainly.
Yes.
There were no radios on board.
No radio?
No. If we'd have one radio officer who would be in contact, but that was so hush-hush that there'd be no information come across. But if something important by some means or other,
yes,
we were notified of the basic details. But it was mostly when we came ashore.
So you was once on board ship, you were essentially cut off from the outside world.
To all intents and purposes, yes.
So did you had wireless aboard there? Did you?
The only wireless on board is the communication. There's no wireless on the ship.
Yeah. So when the war at sea began to intensify, when Germany got hold of the ports along the French coast, what happened? What happened then? Did they change the convoys as such?
We sailed further out to sea to avoid the Bay of Biscay. Yes.
Yes. So you were always sailing from the Merseyside on each convoy?
No, it just depends. I've sailed from from the Swansea and Barry and places like that. I'm from London. Yeah. When we went to London, degaussing was a new issue, and we were tied up for weeks while they laid cables around the ship. Later on, the ships were built with cables on, but the first time we went, they laid miles and miles and miles of cable around the ship.
What was the cable for?
It was to anti-magnetic mines.
Really?
Yeah. They were new at the time. And I forget which ship we're on. The book will tell you all the details.
Okay.
If we went to sea, because the generator was so small, when it was generating for the anti-degaussing, we couldn't have any lights on, and we used to have paraffin lamps while we sailed out to sea until we were away from the magnetic, and then put the generator back to its proper use.
How fast could your ship go, general?
The average about anywhere between 4 and 7 knots.
Is that average speed for a merchantman?
It was for the tramps.
Yes.
If you're doing 10 knots, you were doing well.
Did your time on the ship ever get monotonous? Did it feel like you were doing the same thing at all?
It used to get monotonous in the sense if we were doing a fortnight or more, say if we were sailing to Australia.
Yes.
And sailing across the Pacific. But again, against that was good weather.
Yes.
And so we used to sunbathe. The only thing about the ship sailing day after day after day is when you hit port, you went mad. And we used to spend every penny we had so that we had nothing left when we sailed back again.
Did you?
In case we were sunk.
Did you receive your wage when you reached port?
Yes.
So what sort of rations were on board the ships? How much food was there for everyone?
Well, in the early days, the ships were rationed by the ship owners, and the food was very scanty. The first ship I was on, we didn't have a fridge.
Really?
I didn't have a freezer. All I had was an ice room, and they would put the meat in and put the big ice blocks in. And as I say, it was a month for a fortnight's voyage. So you finished up the inevitable big barrels of bully beef. And in fact, I always stew and sea pie.
It was more or less the same food.
It was
each
very
time.
monotonous.
Was the diet unhealthy? Would you say?
Sparse. Sparse and basic, very basic. They used to make the bread on board, and the bread used to be full of weevils and maggots. After time, you you just consumed it.
You just had to ignore them, did you?
Well, you got used to it. And it's literally true that if you got a ship's biscuit, you could tap it and the weevils would come out of it.
Yeah. So when did your ships in particular stop the Atlantic route and instead went on different routes out of the Pacific and Australia?
Well, after a period of time, what's called the Board of Trade, took over all shipping.
All shipping, right.
And under their control. Things didn't improve a great deal. And remember one occasion particularly when we were in New York, the chief steward, because he knew of the circumstances, ordered twice the amount of food that he would require.
Yes.
Because he knew that they automatically cut it down.
Right.
And to his surprise, he got a lot. So for that particular voyage, we lived well.
Whenabouts was that? Was that in 1940?
I don't know. There'd be an awful lot. You'll have to refer to the books. I can't, as I say to you, I've written the book.
Yes.
And so I've expunged a lot from my mind.
All right.
And it's a peculiar thing. You can hold it in your mind for a long time, but once you write it, it clears your mind.
Yes.
So you really have to refer to the book for quite a lot.
That's fine. I'm just reading through my question. Yeah. So when did you actually start getting a proper anti-submarine escort?
It's about anything like 2 years after before we really got any proper escort. We used to sail across from Canada, and the Canadian Navy used to send out ships, and then as far as they could go, and then there was a period in the middle when there was no escort, and then we would be 2 days off the United Kingdom and get 2 corvettes. It was one occasion I spent a lot of time on tankers, and I was on a ship called the Convoys, that was Shell, and we were transshipped in New York. The Convoys sailed out to the Far East, and we went down to Philadelphia and then to Norfolk, Virginia, and we brought the 6 Lease Len boats across. And the Lease Len boats, in our case, had been taken fresh off the stocks. It was a US mail ship, and the first ships that were handed over to us were straight off the stocks. And the cruiser Manchester was in Norfolk, had been heavily hit in the Mediterranean, and was being repaired in Norfolk, Virginia. And the crew of the Manchester, they were bringing these six ships across. But you have to remember that the Navy, their ships are very sophisticated, but each man has a different job. Whereas in the Merchant Navy, they a greaser, as an example, and engineers, they were dealing with different kinds of engines, and they could deal in the Navy, each man's got a specific job.
Yeah.
Whereas in the Merchant Navy, engineers do everything. So you needed Merchant Navy engine room crew, and again, they don't have a catering crew as such in there. So about 3 or 4 of us joined as a catering crew on this ship, and the thing I remember most about that was I was underage, so I wasn't entitled to my tot of rum.
Really?
Yeah. And these 6 ships, we had an all-American Navy escort. It'll be in the book, tell you the number there, including an aircraft carrier, a small aircraft carrier, and when it was fine, put a plane up in the air to make sure that those 6 ships got across. And when the American Navy handed over, they handed over the 2 corvettes. And we just laughed about it, you see, because the Navy, American Navy, was determined that those ships get across there. We had nearly as many escort as we had ships, and we handed over the 2 corvettes.
So basically what you're saying is that people in the Merchant Navy are far more versatile than in terms of what jobs they can do than the regular Navy.
I would say yes, because the engine room setup is totally different. You see, as you say, you've got 3 distinct departments. You've got the engine room crew, you've got the navigation crew, and the catering crew. The 3 separate departments.
Yes.
Where in the Navy, each man is trained to an individual job, and they're under different circumstances. I can't say I know much about the Navy, but I know that you see, for instance, our men were turned to as ordinary ship's crew, any of the 3 professions, and would man the Oerlikon guns, and which was they just adapted to it.
So when you said you had that aircraft carrier escort, was this one of those carriers which was used to be a merchant ship? That they
No,
the deck
no, it was a full American Navy.
All right. So what point in the war would you say would you say you got proper escorts that you could feel safer aboard the ship?
I never ever felt safe, because even with the 100 ships, you still a sense of danger, and ships still went. You will get some destroyers, but you have to remember that most of the bigger ships were not actually under convoy. They would sail up and down the convoy lanes.
Yes.
You see, again, if it might help you to go through the book and then come back to me. And we had sailed on one occasion. I can't remember the occasion, but we were when the Bismarck was out.
The Bismarck? Oh,
yeah.
Nice.
We were just one day sailing away from there, and we were sent due north, and again when another ship there, the Cruel Sea, all that, Jarvis Bay. When the Jarvis Bay tackled the shear, I think it was.
The Hipper, I think it was.
The Hipper or the shear, one of those. And we were told to head straight up north and we went as near to the North Pole as made no difference, and then put across and come back out again, and it got colder and colder. But there's a lot at sea that you don't know about, because the sea is a big place, and a lot of the action is taking place just over the horizon. Yeah. So you don't actually know of it. It's only by hearsay.
Yeah. So that time you said the Bismarck was out, and how were you told about that, or did you only learn about it
Oh
afterwards?
no, we didn't know about it at the time.
Right.
It's only by history after that I'm able to ascertain quite a lot of things.
Yeah. I think it probably was this year, actually. I think I'm just getting mixed up. But it was definitely a German cruiser which the Jarvis Bay attacked.
Oh yes, yeah.
That ship sacrificed itself for the convoy, didn't it?
Oh yes, yes, literally.
Was there any point where you felt that the Allies might not win?
It never entered our thoughts in that sense, but we knew we were in for a hard struggle, especially when Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor and Singapore fell, and the whole of the Far East went from the Merchant Navy point of view. What upset us was when the Prince of Wales and the Repulse went down in the Far East. Being seamen, it was those things that upset us.
When you hear about fellow ships being sunk.
We were sea life and sea orientated.
Yes.
And it was all the ships. You see you'll see a picture there of the hood. When the hood went, and that's when we were depressed, because she was pride and joy of the British nation at the time.
Yeah.
And to go down in 30 seconds or like that, and only 3 survivors, was that was an incalculable blow. You must. I've got to be very careful not to learn of things after to confuse them with the actual war at the time. And the war at the time, we knew very little.
Yes. So for events like the Hood, you only heard about that when you got back to port, then?
In detail, yes.
Yes.
The main catastrophes would get through by some means. Yeah. But a lot we weren't told.
Okay.
As much as anything, to maintain the morale on the ship.
What would you say is your most memorable event of the war, from your service point of view?
My most memorable event, I suppose, if it comes to that and that censorship, was actually to sail to Pitcairn Island.
Really?
Yeah. And to anchor at Pitcairn Island and take mail ashore and have them come aboard and buy souvenirs off them. Because Pitcairn Island, because I used to be in Pitcairn Island when I was a boy, the Mutiny of the Bounty, and I've still got a copy of
William Bligh, yes.
Yeah. And so to go to Pitcairn Island to me was quite something. And the other big experience was when I was about 18 or so. we were in Bermuda, our ship had broken down,
Mm-hmm.
and we stayed there for 6 weeks.
Really?
And I was almost adopted by a family, and nearly didn't come away from Bermuda. And the people from Bermuda wrote to me for a lot of years after.
Really? You stayed in touch then?
Yeah. And I've said to Pat that if I die, I want my ashes scattered around Bermuda.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, when you did any of the when you were on the ships, did you ever participate in any large events like the D-Day invasion or Operation Torch?
No, the nearest I got to that actual was where we went to Sardinia.
Mm.
At that time, and I was on a tanker then,
Mm-hmm.
and we'd taken, and it was actually under war conditions,
Mm-hmm.
and they were just attacking Italy, the Salerno beach and places like that.
So that was the nearest you got to being near one of the invasion points.
That's the nearest I got to the actual.
Yeah.
I've got the Italy Star. I've got the Pacific Star. I've got the Burma Star. And I've got the Atlantic Star. The Atlantic, I was there for practically the whole 1939-43,
Mm-hmm.
and then I was out in the Middle East and Far East, and we'd sail from Abadan. Called it roughly, we called it the arsehole of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd sailed to India and Burma and Ceylon. From there, backwards and forwards, about 18 times.
Really?
Yeah. And I, as an individual, saw ships sunk. But my particular ship was left unscathed, in spite of all the scares. So I went through the war without a scratch. And a fortnight after the war was, the Far Eastern War was declared, which was the end of all warfare. A fortnight after, I caught typhoid in Egypt.
Really?
And then so I spent back to Abadan. And so I was 3 months there. There were 2 of us. They buried the other one. They couldn't bury me. And I came home convalescent.
Right.
And they wouldn't let me go back to sea again.
Whenabouts was that? Was that just after the war had ended?
I'd say a fortnight after the war in Japan had ended.
Yes.
Yeah, so there was a war in Europe first.
Yes.
And then there was what everybody calls the Forgotten War, what we knew.
The Burmese frontier.
The Japanese War.
Yes.
The Burma, because, as I say, apart from the Russian convoys,
Mm-hmm.
which was the only one we were scared about,
Mm-hmm.
the hardest earned was the Burma Star, because we said we were tankers, so we were carrying fuel.
Did your ships ever go on the Russian convoy route?
No. In that I was very fortunate. I was in Glasgow or Zurich or somewhere around there, and we were all being issued with tropical gear, and at the same time they were insulating all the ship's cabins. So that told us, in spite of the issuing of the gear,
Mm-hmm.
it was Russia they were going to. I hadn't signed on then, so I didn't sign on that ship.
So did you have a choice what ships you signed on to then?
There were 3 choices. There were 3 choices, and you had to sign on the 3rd ship, regardless.
when you'd completed you said you have to do a minimum of 6 months and a maximum of 2 years. When you'd finished your 6 months, did you consider trying to get a different employment, or were you satisfied with your current?
No, we had what we call the Merchant Navy pool,
Mm-hmm.
and the Board of Trade issued. They took over, and in some respects they were quite good because they for each month that you were at sea, you got a period of time,
Mm-hmm.
and so when you came home, if you'd been say 6 months or 12
Mm-hmm.
months at sea, you had a period of time which you could spend at home, and then you would report back to the pool, and the pool would direct you to a ship.
Right.
And as I say, you got three chances. The third ship you had to check whether or not.
Right.
And again, all those were in there of the of the ships and standby. Sometimes I was standing by for quite a while waiting for a ship.
Do you mind if I just check the camera just to check it's still working?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's still working. Okay. Did you hear about events of convoys suffering large losses like PQ-17?
I don't think we knew at the time. As I say, things are very, very quiet at sea, and in quite a lot of cases, things are very, very quiet at home.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'd come home one time and I'd gone to Hull, and Hull had had 2 days of bombing, and it was shut down for 2 days, but there wasn't a word said in the UK anywhere about Hull being bombed. And I've learned after the war that they kept it quiet deliberately. But when I went to find my family, I couldn't find them, and they'd all been transported to Huddersfield.
Did you?
And I had to go to a centre to find out.
Did your relatives know you were serving in the convoys?
Hmm?
Did your relatives know you were serving in the merchant navy?
Oh yes.
Did they approve of you serving, or would they rather you'd been doing something else?
Well, my grandfather was a ship's captain,
Oh.
and he had in fact served in the Boer War, and he was on the old windjammers. But when they heard I was at sea, because as a boy I detested the sea, but I finished up at the sea anyway. And when they found I was at sea, they were quite pleased actually.
Right. It was a tradition, was it, about that?
Tradition,
yeah. You said that there had been a couple of times when ships you'd been with had been sunk. What was it like what happened when a convoy you were in got attacked? I mean, when did you first know about it, and what happened afterwards?
Well, if a convoy was attacked mainly, especially if it was a big convoy, you got the order to scatter, and then the ships, because although you have a lot of ships, the convoy has to sail at the speed of the slowest ship, which in a lot of cases irks the engineers, because every ship has what you call a critical speed, and to maintain that you've either got to go higher or lower. It can't keep at that speed. So we've actually had a collision at sea because the ships have veered, and we lost Davidson things on one occasion, but your first and immediate order, most attacks at night, if you remember, is you get to scatter. Well, of course, then the engine note goes down to the engine room, increase speed. So what you do is you scatter, and that's your primary objective, is to get out of the way.
Is that all you could do? Did you zigzag as well? Did the ships zigzag as well, to try and avoid any torpedoes?
You were zigzagging in convoy, but once you said scatter, you just went hell for leather. Yeah, and if you had reserve speed in your engine, you went. So they literally. The worst I ever did see was I heard a bang, and I was in my little cubicle. I was engineer steward then, and I dashed out on deck, and it only mattered about 30 seconds, and I went out there and I saw a ship end like that. It was kind of iron ore, I later understood, and it had just gone down like that. So in a matter of seconds, a ship sailing along like that, and then it's down like that. So there'll be no survivors off that ship. But your main concern then is to get ahead.
Was there any other events when you were attacked?
Oh, quite a number.
Can you tell me about a couple of them at all? So, like, where you were at the time and what happened?
Well, it's all North Atlantic. I can't remember. It's just a regular occurrence. It's just you just sailed and hoped.
Did they have people on ship watching the horizon for any U-boats at all?
Well, that's the job of the bridge.
Yes.
The bridge, and some of those old tramp steamers, they've got very open bridges, and it can be cold and icy up there. The only consolation is if the waves are so rough, and you're in a situation where you like the rough sea, even though you hated it, you liked it because it kept the U-boats. But you got to remember that the U-boats were no respecter, and the fact that the sea was rough didn't stop them sinking ships.
Did the waves ever damage the ships at all when you were in heavy conditions?
Oh, it could damage them quite a lot, yeah.
Did you have to sail in a certain direction so you wouldn't face the full brunt of them?
Well, don't forget, I'm not a navigator, but the main thing is that you plough into the sea, and some of the waves can be as much as 40 foot high, and you sail into it, and you sail up it, and you sail back down it, and your main thing is to head into the sea, so that you hit it direct and not sideways. That's the job of the navigating crew.
You said you were aboard tankers for a good deal of the war. What were the rules aboard there? Because I take it you weren't allowed to have things like naked flames at all.
No, some tankers had smoking rooms, but most of the tankers, people were non-smokers anyway. But if we were in port, then the galley was shut down, and I can't remember exactly what they did, but everything was cooked by steam. So the engine room must have generated the steam.
So when you would you say that when you were on shore was the only time you could ever really feel safe from any kind of attack? You mean?
I suppose so, yes. But we never thought of it in that way. But after you'd say you'd done a fortnight's voyage or so, and you hit port, your principal aim was to go ashore and get drunk.
Mm-hmm. Were any of your relatives serving in the war at the same time as you?
Yes, my brother, he was in the army.
Yes. Whereabouts was he serving? Yeah.
He served in Germany.
Was that towards the end of the war?
He was just a year younger than me, so he joined the war. Yeah.
Okay. So, towards the end of the war, did your ships actually have weaponry fitted to them? Like you mentioned a 4-inch gun attached to the stern.
Oh, all the ships I was on in later stages had a gun on there.
Yeah. It
became standard.
Did any of them ever use their guns at all, or were they just in case anyone was attacked?
We never actually were in a situation where we would use the guns to attack us on.
Mm-hmm.
There was quite a lot of practice, but we did use the guns against aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Were you ever attacked by aircraft?
Convoys generally,
Yes.
not our ship in particular.
Were any was your apart from the first convoy you were in, were any of your convoys attacked by aircraft that you can remember?
I can't honestly say. I can't. It's that far back. You see, you have to remember, to us it was a normal course of events. So we didn't think about it.
Okay. Did you ever worry about German warships at all?
Yes. As I said, I mentioned the Bismarck and
Graf Spee.
I saw the Graf Spee when I was in Buenos Aires. She had already committed demise by then. But we went across from Buenos Aires across to Montevideo, so we actually saw
the wreckage.
Yeah. But that happened in 1939.
Yes.
And of course, I went to sea in January 1940.
Okay.
But we knew all about it.
What did you feel when you headed the Channel Dash? What did you feel when you headed the Channel Dash? You know, when those 3 German cruisers just went up the English Channel in 1942?
We didn't know about it.
Yeah. As you were saying, it's like being cut off from the outside world when you're aboard the ship.
Oh, we never knew anything about it.
Okay. What was your opinion of Germany during the war? I mean, did you feel they were wrong to be fighting Britain like that? I mean, your specific opinion of the people running the U-boats.
We didn't like the Germans because they'd started the war. The people we hated were the French because they didn't put up a really good fight. Mm-hmm. And not only didn't put up a good fight, but they actually cooperated with the Germans. And to this day, all people of my era hate the French because we feel that they let us down. The Germans that was the way their way of life. We criticised the Germans for allowing the Nazism to happen. But at the same time, if you study history, which I know you do, because of the poor terms of the armistice, and again I put all that down there, again it was the French principally who created it, because if they had peace on honourable terms, then I don't think that would have happened. But they left the Germans with a sense of anger and frustration, which I can well understand, because they, I mean, it was an armistice. It wasn't a winning of the war by one side or the other, and therefore there should have been more generous terms. So that I can understand. I don't agree with it, but I can understand it. But the French who created it the second time round, each time we've saved the French, but each time they hate us because we've saved them.
What about Germany and Japan? How do you feel about them?
Germany we can understand. Japan were treacherous, and Italy didn't really want war. And this is epitomised by Italian prisoners of war practically went free in this country for all intents and purposes, because the average Italian didn't want the war. And I know cases of the Italians, in fact we've just been up to the Orkneys now, and they worked alongside the people. I've been to Aldborough St John near Richmond, and they had a Italian war camp there, and they had that much freedom. And when the desert rats eventually took over North Africa, they surrendered in their thousands. And one or two British soldiers with thousands and thousands of prisoners, only glad to be out of the war.
Yeah.
So, but the Japanese were treacherous, and the Germans, whilst I disagree, it's not unexpected. As I say, the Italians, they were just also rams.
When you heard about Pearl Harbor, what was your opinion?
Horror. Yeah, and we thought at the time that an incalculable blow to the American Navy. Credit to the American Navy, they did recover fast. But I mean, the number of capital ships that they lost there, they lost their base, but they still survived.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm just checking the calendar.
Yeah.
So I just need to be careful about the battery power. So I've got about 20 minutes of power left. So, is there anything in particular you want to say, which you think should be said on this film I'm making? Anything in particular you want to add to something I've not said, which you think could be important?
The only thing I can say is that I'm a Christian, and if all Christians, all people follow the Christian beliefs of love and friendship to one another, then we wouldn't get these wars. But unfortunately, nearly all wars are based on greed. Basically, that's what it is, greed. Somebody wants something of somebody else, choose what it is.
What's your view on the events in the Middle East at the moment? Like in Afghanistan and Iraq?
Afghanistan, I'm two minds about, because if we had have left them, it's like a canker and could have got worse. And that's one side, and the other side is why should we be fighting when the Afghanistans themselves are so tolerant of their enemies? So we're not really eradicating the Taliban at all. And again, it's all based on dope, isn't it? Whilst they're squabbling over themselves, everybody else is producing dope. And as far as the Middle East is concerned, that was bound to happen. Because sooner or later, through the course of history, is that you can dominate people for so long, but sooner or later, they rouse themselves. And that's gone through history. Times without number of people. You get the Roman Empire, which became all embracing and gradually crumbled because people began to assert their rights.
So it's the Arab Spring now.
The only difference is the British Empire was based basically on peace and working with the people, and that was destroyed by the Germans.
Anything else you want to add at all?
No.
Sorry, can I just go back to you said you were in Burma. What was the Oh, this is actually a general question.
I was on the tankers.
On the tankers, sorry, I mean, but what was the weather like at sea in the Indian Ocean?
Hot.
Did it rain a lot while you were there? Did it rain a lot in the Indian Ocean?
No.
Just very hot and humid, would you say, or hot and dry?
Well, all that area, as I said, I've been to Abadan, and there's sometimes it could be 120 in the shade, and the heat was so much that, you know, when you look on the top of a stove and you can see the heat shimmering, well, that's how it was like when you're walking down the street.
Really?
And because I was out there nearly 2 years, so it got to a state that if the temperature drops, because the sand doesn't hold the heat, and it used to drop, and it dropped 40 degrees at night.
Right.
And so we could be 80 degrees and we just put our winter clothing on, because we got so used to the high. And 40 degrees in this country would kill people, but 40 degrees down there, we got used to it. On the occasions, you could sometimes, say, drink a cup of coffee and it would come straight out like that. On another occasion, if there was moisture in the air, it'd still be very, very hot, but you'd be absolutely wet because of the humidity, as you say.
So, when the war ended, how did you feel, and when did you learn of that? Well, in both places, that is, both Germany and Japan.
I think we were sailing up towards Egypt then.
When you heard about Germany, though?
Oh, about Germany, I don't know where we were.
Well, how did you feel when you heard the war had ended? Did you feel relieved?
No, because we were out in the Far East then.
All right.
Yeah, and we said, what about this war?
And when you heard Japan ended, did you feel relieved then?
I felt relieved then, because then yeah.
So did you stay with the Navy after the war?
I told you, I caught typhoid
Yes.
after, and I wasn't allowed to go back to sea, especially being catering.
All right.
Yeah.
So what did you do after that then?
Well, I convalesced for 6 months, and then I went into a foundry. And whilst it was raining, it was all right. But whenever the sun shone, I used to fret. And there was many a time I used to clock off at lunchtime and never go back. And eventually, I put my notice in and I went to work on a war rag camp. I was to get about 1 to 6. I was to charge 1 to 6 for my bed and breakfast. And it was a shilling an hour working there. And I was happy in the open air. I'd been used to the open air. And that carried on, yeah. And they eventually got married. Yeah.
I was checking the camera. So what was your... so did you spend most of your life working in the foundry?
No, I've done 1,001 jobs. I eventually finished up. I used to be a works counsellor, chief shop steward, secretary of the British Legion, secretary of the Church Men's Society, and a local councillor, all at the same time. And after a lot of years, I gave up the secretary of the British Legion. And if I'd have tried to go back again, I don't know how I would have fitted it in. At that time, besides, I was working for ICI at the time, yeah. And then I became a full-time union official. Then I became an industrial relations advisor. And that's how I retired, as an industrial relations advisor. And it's fair to say that I earned my job from all my experience in my voluntary work. Because in voluntary work you're doing anything and everything. And I learned bookkeeping, accountancy, chairing meetings, and 1,001 things, and understanding people. I learned to understand people when I was 17. That's when I first learned that people talk a lot but never act on it. Because when I first went ashore in South America, and the lad said, oh, when we get to South America, we'll do so and so and so and so. So when we went to South America, and I said to the lads, well, come on then, what are we doing? And I had to lead them, and I was only 17, 18. And that was when I began to realise that all people have feet of clay. And that's when I began to understand people. I would spend an hour or more with a violent, drunken man and persuading him in peaceful ways. Then somebody would come along and say, don't come bum, and upset it all again. Yeah. I could learn to handle people, even there. Which became my life.
How do you view your war experiences looking back today? I mean, do you feel glad that you you served your country? Or was it just another job, like you say?
Principally, it was a job. It never occurred to me that, well, it wouldn't be true to say that my life was in danger, but I thought that was a normal course of events. Yeah. And we just lived each day. The only time really we were afraid is if a ship broke down and the convoy sailed on and you were left on your own with no engine power. It's the only time I really got scared.
So did this happen then? What happened? How did the engine broke down then? Whereabouts were you?
Well, it can break down for a number of reasons, but the main thing is you'd be silent on a ship and somebody could drop a spanner and it would reverberate all the way through the ship. And if it reverberates all through the ship, then it reverberates under the sea.
Mm-hmm.
And the submarine can hear it.
Mm.
So this is when we used to walk around quietly.
Yeah.
All to no avail.
So did this only happen once where the ship broke down, or did it happen a couple of times?
Only once that I can remember, when we were actually at sea and we broke down.
Mm-hmm. Did you only ever see that one ship sink, which you mentioned earlier, or did you see others sink?
Well, I've seen quite a few ships sink, yeah. But that was the quickest I ever saw one go down.
Yeah. Could you give me a bit of a description of the sinking of the others, perhaps? Or might give me an idea of how they sank or what it looked like?
No, your main concern was to get out of it.
Right.
It was a way of life, and if you were sunk, from our point of view, it was unfortunate.
Mm-hmm.
Say we were on tankers, and when we were carrying high octane,
Mm-hmm.
We used to say to ourselves, well, at least if we get hit, we won't know anything about it. And that was the way we lived.
Did you feel that your ships in particular would be key targets for the U-boats because you were carrying fuel?
We knew that tankers were only put in the middle of the convoy because they were the most vulnerable.
I take it there was no kind of difference in pay for working on a more high-risk ship?
No, the tankers were, in some cases, not in all cases, noted for what we call better feeding ships. That was the main criteria.
When they say better feeding, does that mean they were carrying the fuel?
Well, you see, you've got to be acclimatised to tankers because in so many cases, tankers, they can load and unload so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
That the most we would be there, say, be a day.
Mm-hmm.
And also most tanker berths
Mm-hmm.
are away from the main port.
Yes.
So if you did get ashore, there was nowhere to go.
Right.
And you're only one night, and then you're back out to sea again. So
Okay.
and yet we stayed on tankers. I don't know why. I can't honestly say why.
Let's check the camera again, sorry.
Okay.
Keep doing this. Got about 3 minutes left. Is there anything you want to say to finish off, Tom?
The only thing I'll say that because of the pressure of my wife and other people, I did manage to write down most of my experiences, and they're contained in the book.
I'm sure this will be very valuable for my documentary as well. Yeah.
They in fact, I've got to read it now to find out what I've done. So to that extent, I want to thank my wife for making me do it.
Yeah. Okay. Sure there's nothing else you want to add at all? Or?
No.
In that case then, thank you very much for